In the sultry heart of Mississippi, 1842, beneath the hum of cicadas and the scent of magnolia, stood the Hartwell Plantation, a place where wealth gleamed over rot. Its owner, Charles Hartwell, was a man who believed everything had a price, even love, even life. When his young wife, Eleanor, fell gravely ill, Charles sought a cure from physicians, priests, and poisoners alike. But as her sickness deepened and his debts mounted, desperation turned to cruelty. In an act that shocked even those who served him, he sold her his own wife to a slave named Josiah. He called it a treatment, a strange punishment wrapped in superstition and sin. But what passed between the dying woman and the enslaved man in those final days would tear the plantation apart. For Eleanor Hartwell did not die quietly, and the secret she whispered before her last breath would change the fate of every soul bound to that cursed land. The first time Charles Hartwell saw the sickness take his wife, it was on a Sunday morning. The church bells were ringing down by the river, but Eleanor was too weak to rise. Her once bright hair clung to her face, her skin pale as the sheets she lay upon. "Charles," she whispered, her voice soft and cracked. "It hurts to breathe." He didn't answer. He only poured himself a drink, the amber liquid trembling in his glass. He hated weakness in slaves, in animals, and most of all, in the woman he had once adored. The doctors called it consumption. They spoke of bleeding her, of herbs and prayers, of time. But Charles had no time left. The plantation was failing, the cotton spoiled by rot. His debts had grown teeth. And now, even his wife was betraying him by dying too slowly. That evening, as the house fell into shadow, a knock came at the door. It was Josiah, a tall, quiet slave who worked the stables. His hands were scarred, his eyes steady in a way that made white men uneasy. "Mr. Hartwell," he said, bowing slightly. "Ma'am's horse broke the gate last night. I fixed it." Charles grunted, barely looking up. But Eleanor's voice floated weakly from her bed. "Thank you, Josiah." He turned toward her, and for a brief moment, their eyes met a strange, fleeting connection, like two souls recognizing something neither dared name. Charles saw it, and in that instant, something dark bloomed in him. 2 days later, after another doctor's visit ended with the same hopeless words, Charles made a decision that even the devil might have hesitated to claim. He gathered the house slaves in the yard, his voice sharp with drink and anger. "You've all heard the gossip," he said. "My wife's dying, and no one can fix her. But I've heard tell that the touch of a strong man can pull the sickness from a weak one. That's what the old folks say, isn't it?" The slaves shifted uneasily, unsure if he was serious or mad. "Josiah," Charles barked. "Step forward." The man obeyed, his jaw tight. "You'll stay with her tonight," Charles said. "In her room." Gasps rippled through the yard. Even the overseer, McCrae, looked shocked. "Sir, that's—" "Quiet," Charles snapped. "It's an order." Josiah's heart hammered. He looked toward the house, toward Eleanor's window, the curtain fluttering faintly in the evening breeze. He didn't understand the game Hartwell was playing, but he saw the madness in the man's eyes. "If it's her wish," Josiah said carefully, "then I'll do what's asked." Charles smirked. "Oh, it will be. I'll make sure of that." That night, the sky was black with thunderclouds. Rain lashed against the windows as Josiah climbed the stairs, escorted by the overseer. When the door opened, Eleanor was sitting upright, her face ghostly pale. "What is this?" she asked weakly. Charles stood behind Josiah, a cruel smile curling his lips. "It's simple, darling. You've taken to wasting away in this bed, and I've grown tired of watching it. They say the body can be healed by heat, by life. So I'm giving you some." Her eyes widened as the truth dawned. "You can't mean—" "Oh, I mean it," he said. "You'll be his now. For one night. Maybe it'll save you. Maybe it'll kill you. Either way, it'll free me." He turned and left, locking the door behind him. Eleanor sat frozen, trembling. Josiah stood by the door, refusing to look at her. "I won't," he said finally. "Not this way." "I know," she whispered. "I don't want you to." For a long time, they said nothing. Only the rain spoke, steady and endless against the glass. Then Eleanor's voice softened. He wants to shame me before I die, to make me less than him. But he's already less than a man. Josiah dared to meet her gaze. He's lost his soul, she smiled faintly. Then maybe it's time someone took it from him. He blinked. Ma'am, come closer, she said, reaching out a frail hand. There's something I need to tell you. He hesitated, then stepped forward, kneeling beside her bed. Her fingers brushed his, cool and trembling. Josiah, she whispered, the sickness isn't what's killing me. It's him. The medicine, he put something in it. I can taste the metal. Josiah's blood ran cold. He's poisoning you? She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. I think he wants me gone before his creditors come. My father's will, it left the estate to me, not him. If I die, it all becomes his again. She coughed violently, blood staining her lips. I have one request. Promise me, when I'm gone, you'll make him pay. Josiah's throat tightened. Ma'am, I'm a slave. I can't. You can, she said fiercely, gripping his wrist with surprising strength. There's power in what's right. I see it in you. He thinks you're nothing, but you're everything he fears. Lightning flashed, illuminating her face beautiful even in death's shadow. Promise me. Josiah bowed his head. I promise. She smiled, a tear rolling down her cheek. Good. Then maybe God will forgive me for what comes next. He frowned. What do you mean? But before he could ask again, she slipped a small glass vial from beneath her pillow, one Charles had left her for pain. She poured its contents into a cup of water and held it out to him. Drink, she said. He hesitated. No, ma'am. Her eyes were calm. Not poison. Memory. He took it, and as the bitter taste filled his mouth, something inside him shifted. A strange heat spread through his chest, like a burden and a blessing both at once. Outside, thunder crashed. Inside, the clock struck midnight, and in that dark, storm-filled hour, the dying woman's whisper, the one that would haunt the Hartwell name, forever slipped through the air between them. It was only 5 words. He'll die by your hands. The morning after the storm, the plantation awoke to silence. Not the peaceful kind that came after rain, but the heavy, suffocating kind that lingered before grief. The servants moved through the halls like ghosts, whispering behind their hands. Eleanor Hartwell was dead. The bell from the chapel tolled 9 slow times, its sound rolling across the soaked fields. Each note seemed to strike a deeper chord of dread within those who heard it. The mistress had been gentle, a rare softness in a world built on cruelty, and now that softness was gone. Josiah stood at the edge of the slave quarters, rain still dripping from his hair, staring toward the great house where her body lay. He hadn't slept. He hadn't eaten. Her words replayed in his mind. Again and again, he'll die by your hands. He didn't understand what she had done to him. The strange vial she'd made him drink still burned faintly in his chest, a lingering fire that seemed to pulse with her voice. He felt different, heavier, but clearer, as if something in him had awakened. The overseer, McCrae, approached, his boots sinking into the mud. Hartwell wants you up by the house, he said curtly. Now. Josiah met his gaze. For what? McCrae shrugged. To see what your hands have done, I reckon. Inside, the air was thick with perfume and death. Eleanor's body lay in her bed, pale and still beneath a lace veil. Candles flickered on every surface, their flames bending in the draught. Charles Hartwell stood at the foot of the bed, a handkerchief in one hand, a tumbler of brandy in the other. His face was calm, too calm, the face of a man performing grief rather than feeling it. When Josiah entered, the master's eyes hardened. There he is, Charles said coldly. The last man to see her alive. Josiah said nothing. You were with her when she died, weren't you? Yes, sir. Charles took a long drink, his gaze unblinking. Did she suffer? Josiah's jaw tightened. No more than she already had. A pause. Then Charles's lips curved into something between a sneer and a smile. Then maybe you did her a kindness. Josiah's fists clenched at his sides. She's to be buried tomorrow, Charles continued, walking slowly around the bed. And you, Josiah, will dig her grave, alone. Josiah's head lifted. "Sir, that ain't customary." "I don't care what's customary," Hartwell hissed. "You'll bury her, and you'll remember what she was, your master's wife. Nothing more." McCrae stood in the doorway, silent, eyes down. He didn't like the look in Hartwell's face, that mix of rage and fear. Josiah bowed his head. "Yes, sir." That evening, Josiah took a spade to the edge of the property, where the family cemetery lay behind an iron gate draped in moss. The ground was soaked from the storm, the earth heavy and red like blood. He dug until his hands bled, until the moon rose silver through the clouds. Every strike of the shovel was a heartbeat, a memory, her voice, her tears, her final command. When the hole was nearly done, he paused, leaning on the spade, and whispered into the night, "I'll keep my promise, ma'am." The wind stirred, faint and low, as if the swamp beyond the trees had heard him. The next day, the plantation dressed in black. Eleanor's coffin was carried by 4 house slaves, Josiah among them. She looked peaceful, her lips faintly curved, as though death had brought her relief. Charles followed the procession in silence, his hand gripping a silver flask. When the coffin was lowered, the preacher began to speak, but his voice trembled. The ground beneath them was too soft, the air too still. It felt wrong, as though the earth itself rejected the burial. When the final prayer ended, Charles stepped forward, tossing a handful of dirt onto the coffin lid. "Goodbye, my darling," he said. "May you rest easier than you lived." Josiah felt the bile rise in his throat. He wanted to scream, to tell them all what the man had done, but he kept his silence. Not yet. When it was done, he filled the grave, each scoop of soil falling like a drumbeat. When the last clod struck the coffin, a faint sound escaped from somewhere, a whisper carried on the wind. Josiah froze. It was faint, almost too soft to believe. But he heard it, her voice. "Remember your promise." His heart thudded in his chest. McCrae called out for him, but Josiah didn't answer. He turned toward the swamp, eyes drawn to its dark, rippling edge. Something called to him from there, something deeper than grief. That night, Hartwell drank alone in his study. The rain had returned, a steady drizzle that tapped against the windows. He sat before the fire, staring into the flames, seeing her face there. He told himself he'd done the right thing. She had been dying anyway. Her death had freed him from debt, from weakness, from the burden of love. But then came the sound, a faint creak from the hall. He turned sharply, eyes scanning the doorway. Nothing, only shadows. Then a whisper, so soft it might have been the wind. "Charles." His glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. "Who's there?" No answer. Only the slow, rhythmic creak of the front door swinging open. Hartwell rose, sweat prickling at his neck. He stepped into the hall, calling again, "Who's there?" But his voice trembled now. Then he saw it, a trail of wet footprints, leading from the open door toward the stairs. Bare feet. Small. Eleanor's feet. Hartwell's breath hitched. He followed, step by step, up the staircase, past the portraits of his ancestors, until he reached the master bedroom. The door was open. Inside, the bed was empty, the sheets disturbed, as though someone had just risen from them. And there, on the vanity, sat a single object, the vial of medicine. Empty. On the mirror, words had been scrawled in something dark, something that looked like blood. "She remembers." Hartwell stumbled back, trembling. The fire in his chest burned hot fear, guilt, disbelief, all at once. Then the lightning flashed, illuminating the window. Outside, standing by the gate of the cemetery, was Josiah. His face was still, unreadable, but his eyes, they burned like the storm. Hartwell's throat tightened. He turned away from the window, muttering to himself, "He knows." From somewhere deep in the house, a clock began to chime midnight. And as the 12th chime echoed through the empty halls, the fire in the hearth flared bright, then went out, leaving only darkness. The night air lay heavy over Rosewood, thick with the smell of damp earth and the tang of river reeds. Clara moved silently through the long shadows of the magnolia grove, her skirts brushing the dew-soaked grass. The moon hung low, pale and watchful, casting a silver sheen over the landscape. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted, a lonely sentinel in the darkness. She held the small wooden locket in her palm, the rose carved into it warm against her skin. It was Samuel's work, left for her as a sign, a token of something neither her mother nor the world could understand. Her heart thumped as she neared the clearing where they had agreed to meet, a place far from the prying eyes of servants, overseers, and, most importantly, her mother. Samuel was already there, crouched beside the shallow stream, his hands resting on the dirt as if he were waiting for her, for this moment. The lantern he carried gave off a soft, golden light that flickered across his face, revealing the hardened lines of a life spent in labor, but also a glimmer of something softer, hope, perhaps, or longing. "Clara," he whispered as she approached, voice barely more than the rustle of leaves. She knelt beside him, careful not to disturb the fragile quiet. "You came," she said, breathless. "I told you I would," he replied, his dark eyes searching hers. "But this is dangerous." "I don't care," she said firmly. "I can't stay away." He shook his head, the lantern swaying. "You don't understand the risks. Your mother." "I do," Clara interrupted, the word sharp as a blade. "And I don't care. I'll take whatever comes." Samuel's gaze dropped to the locket in her hand. "You have it?" She held it out. "You made this?" He nodded slowly. "I started it for her, for your mother. But it seemed right to give it to you instead." Clara's fingers traced the carved rose. "It's beautiful. You care for both of us, don't you?" He looked away, conflicted. "It's complicated. Your mother, she's my mistress. But you're different." She leaned closer, feeling the warmth of him despite the cool night. "Then tell me what to do. Tell me how to be with you, without her knowing." Samuel's hands trembled slightly as he reached for hers. "There's no way without danger. None. But we can try. We must try." For a long moment, they simply held hands, silent in the moonlight, hearts beating in unison. The world outside the grove, the fields, the manor, the housekeeper's sharp eyes seemed to fade, leaving only them, bound by desire, fear, and the unspoken weight of secrets. But secrets have a way of unraveling. From the edge of the clearing, a rustle made them both freeze. Clara's breath caught in her throat. Samuel stiffened, his body tense. Another step, deliberate and heavy, and the faint glow of a lantern pierced the shadows. "Clara?" Her mother's voice, trembling with a mix of fury and something darker, possessiveness. Eleanor's figure emerged, the moonlight catching her pale, sharp features. "Clara Whitford," she said, her tone low, dangerous. "What do you think you're doing?" Clara's hand tightened around Samuel's. "Mother." Eleanor stepped closer, the lantern illuminating the hard gleam in her eyes. "You've gone too far this time. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Samuel rose, stepping slightly in front of Clara, though the stance was hesitant, protective. "Ma'am, Eleanor's voice was icy. "Do not speak to me." She turned her gaze to her daughter, sharp and unforgiving. "You have disobeyed me. You have defied every rule, every expectation I have set for you. And for what? A trinket? A secret meeting in the dark?" Clara met her mother's glare without flinching. "For him," she said simply, voice firm. "For Samuel." Eleanor's eyes narrowed, and her hand clenched the lantern so tightly that the light wavered. "You will leave him. You will leave this nonsense behind." "Or, you'll do what?" Clara challenged. "Sell him again? Threaten him? You don't own my heart, Mother." A tense silence hung between them, the night pressing down like a living thing. Samuel's hand trembled as he reached for the locket, but Eleanor's gaze fell on it immediately. Recognition flashed in her eyes, and the color drained from her face. "You," she whispered, voice tight. "You gave her that? After everything?" Samuel stepped back, unsure, but Clara held the locket up. "He gave me this," she said, her tone defiant. "Not for you, Mother, for me." The fury in Eleanor's eyes ignited like wildfire. "You insolent girl. You dare defy me in my own home?" Clara's chest rose and fell rapidly. "I dare, because I will not be afraid of love. Not anymore. Not of him, and not of you." Eleanor's lips curled into a dangerous, sharp smile. "So be it," she said softly, almost to herself. "If it must be, then the plantation will know the consequences of disobedience. If you want." She turned and left the clearing, her lantern bobbing against the darkness, leaving Clara and Samuel trembling in the moonlight. They watched her retreat, understanding, without words, that the night had changed everything. The risk had grown immeasurably, and the line between love and danger had blurred. Clara pressed the locket to her chest. "What now?" she asked. Samuel took a deep breath, his shoulders heavy with the weight of impossible choices. "Now, we survive. Together. Somehow." The swamp beyond the plantation whispered in the wind, a reminder that every secret has a price, and every love carries its own peril. And far away, in the dark halls of Rosewood, Eleanor Whitford began plotting a way to reclaim what she believed was hers by any means necessary. The swamp held its breath as Josiah stepped through the knee-deep water. The fog hung low, weaving between the cypress knees like ghostly fingers. Dawn had barely brushed the horizon, but already the air was thick with the scent of decay and damp earth. Every step splashed water, breaking the stillness with a subtle, mocking rhythm. The locket burned against his chest, a reminder that Eleanor's presence was not gone. He repeated her words under his breath. Find what he buried. His hands gripped a long iron spade he had borrowed from the barn. Every inch he advanced, the mud clung, pulling at him like the swamp itself was reluctant to give up its secrets. Finally, he reached a small clearing where the moss hung like green curtains from the cypress trees. It was here he knew it that Hartwell had buried something too important to leave to memory alone. Josiah dropped to his knees, plunging the spade into the soft mud. The blade sank easily, as if the earth were eager to tell its story. He dug methodically, layer by layer, water dripping down his brow, sweat mingling with the swamp's sludge. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, but the clearing remained shrouded in mist. The only sounds were the occasional splash of unseen creatures and the distant cries of birds startled by his intrusion. Then, the spade struck something hard. Josiah froze, heart hammering. Mud clung to a rectangular shape beneath the surface. He pushed aside the earth with gloved hands, revealing a rough wooden box, blackened by water and time. The box was sealed with rusted iron hinges. His fingers trembled as he pried it open. Inside lay a collection of papers, yellowed and brittle, and a small bundle wrapped in cloth. He picked up the first paper. The handwriting was unmistakable. Eleanor's, elegant and precise, despite her final days of sickness. If you find this, know the truth. My death is not the end. He will not escape what he has done. You must watch him, protect the living, remember the water. Josiah's eyes scanned the rest of the papers. Confessions, names, debts, threats, a detailed record of Hartwell's corruption, his cruelty, and the twisted bargains he had forced upon others, including the sick wife he had sold to a slave. But it was the bundle that caught his attention. Inside the cloth were several vials of dark liquid, each sealed with wax and marked in Eleanor's hand. Poison. For him, if he returns to harm another. Josiah's chest tightened. He realized the magnitude of what Eleanor had left him, a choice, a weapon, and a warning. She had prepared for her death, and now it was up to him to finish what she had started. A sudden rustle in the underbrush made him freeze. Eyes in the swamp. A figure stepped forward from the mist. Hartwell, disheveled, his eyes wild with fear and rage. "You," he hissed. "How did you find this?" Josiah stood slowly, holding the vials behind him. "Eleanor told me. She said the water knows the truth, and now, so do I." Hartwell's lips twisted into a grimace. "You have no idea what you're holding. You think you can punish me? You have no power over what's coming." Josiah stepped closer, mud squishing beneath his boots. "You sold her. You broke her. You thought death would hide your crimes, but she spoke to me, and I'll make sure the swamp remembers you the way it remembers her." Hartwell lunged, but Josiah sidestepped, swinging the spade to drive him back. The two struggled, mud and water flying in every direction. Hartwell's strength was faltering. Years of cruelty had made him ruthless, but frail. Finally, Josiah managed to push him to the edge of the water. Hartwell slipped, screaming, and tumbled into the swamp's murky depths. Josiah watched as he flailed, trying to find purchase in the slippery mud. "He's done," Josiah whispered to himself. But the water stirred as if alive, ripples spreading unnaturally fast. Something beneath the surface moved, long, sinuous shapes circling Hartwell. Josiah felt the locket against his chest. Eleanor's final gift, her warning, her guidance, it was all leading him here. The swamp would have its revenge, but he knew he had done his part. As the sun broke fully over the horizon, a strange calm settled over the clearing. The mist lifted, revealing the cypress trees, tall and silent witnesses to the events of the past hours. Josiah sank to his knees, exhausted, watching the water. In the distance, he thought he saw her Eleanor, pale and radiant, standing among the moss-draped trees. She smiled. The weight of her suffering finally lifted, and then slowly faded into the morning light. The papers, the vials, the confession of Hartwell's sins, all of it was now in Josiah's hands. A legacy of vengeance, of justice, and of the woman who refused to be silenced even in death. He stood, looking toward the swamp, and whispered a promise. "I'll guard your truth, Eleanor. The living will remember." The water stilled. The wind carried a faint melody, Eleanor's hymn, echoing across the swamp, soft, serene, and victorious. Josiah turned away, the locket warm against his chest. The swamp had spoken, the master had fallen, and the legacy of Eleanor Hartwell, the sick wife whose whispered words had changed everything, was secure at last. The air over Hartwell Plantation had changed. No longer was it thick with fear and hushed whispers. A tense, expectant silence hung over the grounds, as if the land itself waited for judgment. Josiah moved carefully through the rows of slave quarters, clutching the bundle of papers Eleanor had left behind. Each step carried the weight of 1,000 suppressed voices, of years of suffering, of secrets that had festered in the shadows. He stopped first at the quarters where Mary and her children slept. They stirred at the sound of his footsteps, peering out from behind threadbare curtains, eyes wide with cautious hope. "It's time," Josiah said softly. "Time for the truth to be known." Word spread quickly, faster than Josiah could move. By midday, every laborer, cook, and field hand had gathered in the main yard, drawn by curiosity, fear, and a shared sense of anticipation. The overseers, uneasy and unsure, hovered at the edges, sensing the shift but unaware of its cause. Josiah climbed onto a crate, the bundle of Eleanor's confessions in hand. The crowd grew silent. The rustle of wind through the cypress trees mingled with the murmurs of anticipation. He opened the first page, letting the brittle paper tremble in the sunlight. "My name is Eleanor Hartwell," he read aloud, her voice echoing in his memory. "I have suffered under the cruelty of my husband, who valued power above love and wealth above human life. What you will read are the truths he sought to bury, the injustices he committed in silence, and the vengeance he attempted to hide. Remember them, remember me, and remember justice." Josiah began to read the specifics. Debts owed to neighboring planters through shady dealings. Contracts that bound innocent people into lifelong servitude. The secret punishments inflicted upon those who defied Hartwell. Every page revealed not only Hartwell's corruption but also the network of fear and control he maintained. As he read, the crowd grew restless, faces contorted with disbelief, anger, and finally, relief. Some cried, others shouted accusations. The overseers paled. Josiah's voice did not falter. He continued, revealing the most damning pieces of evidence. The sale of Eleanor herself, her illness exploited as a bargaining chip, and the threats made to those who would speak. Then came the vials. Josiah held them high, explaining their origin, the meticulous care Eleanor had taken to ensure they were never misused, and her warning that they were a final line of protection, a measure of justice if the sins of the living continued to harm the innocent. The plantation workers listened, a collective shiver running through them. They were no longer silent witnesses. They were inheritors of the truth, guardians of a legacy that demanded justice. Murmurs turned into conversations, which grew louder, firmer. Plans were made, decisions taken. For the first time, the balance of power shifted in their favor. Josiah's eyes scanned the crowd. He saw the blacksmith, silent for years, nodding to the field hands. He saw Mary, her children standing taller than ever, as if the weight of oppression had lifted from their shoulders. Even some overseers, wary but honest men, looked on with respect, realizing the chains of complicity could no longer hold. Then, at sunset, Josiah brought the papers to the main house. He left them in the parlor, open on the desk where Hartwell had once signed orders and sealed fates. The plantation itself seemed to pulse with anticipation. The walls whispered secrets. The floors held the echoes of every cry and plea that had been ignored. By nightfall, Hartwell's absence had been fully noticed. Rumors spread, growing wilder with each retelling. Some claimed he had fled the state. Others whispered darker fates. No one knew for sure. All that remained was the record of his deeds, now laid bare for all who had suffered. Josiah stepped back into the shadows of the trees, locket warm against his chest, and surveyed the plantation. He had fulfilled his promise to Eleanor. The swamp had claimed the guilty, but it had also given life to the truth. Hartwell's power was broken. His name would not be honored, and his deeds could no longer harm the living. In the quarters, the workers spoke freely for the first time in years. Names were shared, alliances formed, and a sense of communal strength began to grow. Josiah realized that revenge had not been the only goal. It was the beginning of restoration, the reclamation of dignity stolen for decades. The moon rose high, silver light filtering through the cypress trees. The wind carried a soft song, Eleanor's song, echoing across the plantation, celebrating liberation, justice, and the unbroken spirit of those who had suffered. Josiah stood silently, watching the flickering lanterns of the slave quarters, understanding that this night marked not an end, but a beginning. The plantation would heal, slowly but surely, with truth as its foundation. Eleanor's voice, carried through the pages and through his own heart, had ensured that the living would remember. And somewhere in the distance, the swamp sighed, a living witness to history, a testament to the power of courage, love, and vengeance rightly served.